day number 3. So in the next 60 minutes or so, we'll have a live session on climate-related risks and what especially we as regulators can do about it. So the world has been getting warmer, which scientists agrees because of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions that are generated by economic and human activities. This warming of the climate is not only reflected in higher temperatures, but also severe weather-related events such as floods and droughts and heat waves and wildfires and many others that you can think about. Now, let's come home specifically to Africa. So we see rainfall, changes in rainfall patterns and rainfall amount. And as our responses to the check-in question has indicated, this actually affects us in a number of ways. For a number of sub-Saharan African countries, we depend on certain crops, and the changes in the pattern and the amount of rainfall threaten our dependence on those crops. There are droughts, there are strong winds, there's rise in sea levels. So in 2019, there was a cyclone Idai, that hit the southeastern part, affecting countries like Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Malawi. There were droughts and floods in Ethiopia recently, and there was severe drought in the eastern parts of Africa, which led to loss of livestock, severe loss of livestock and other things. So we can actually see signs of this climate change. So within the next 1 hour or so, I hope that we have gone through the model on Connect. And so within the next few minutes, we will try to find or discuss these questions and then go through a case study, group work, so that we can share our thoughts. I will try as much as possible to do a quick overview of these questions so that we can spend a lot more time discussing the case study or the group work. So why does climate change matter to financial regulators? Why is it necessary that we as financial regulators get concerned about climate change? What are the risks actually? What risks are posed by climate change? How do the climate change risks affect the financial system? Do they affect the financial system in the first place? And if so, how? What should financial institutions, the institutions we regulate, what can they do about the situation? Lastly, and most importantly, what can we supervisors do about the situation? So let's come to why does climate change matter to us as financial sector regulators and supervisors? Can anybody share some thoughts? Any quick? You can just put up your hand and share your thought. Why climate change matters to us? Why is it important to us?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I think it matters to us because the entities we regulate manage risks. And with this climate change, there are new emerging risks. And so we expect companies to, which may affect the business models. Companies, the traditional models which have been used by companies may not be appropriate for these emerging risks. So they may need to change their business model. It may require some new skills and expertise, and it may also require additional resources. And with the entities whom we supervise being affected, this automatically has an impact on us as regulators. We may need to change our laws to see how do we accommodate these changes that are taking place to ensure that our entities are able to be aligned with what is taking place in the environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, I see a hand up, EM. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. This is Edwin from Malawi.
Edwin. Right.
Yes. I just wanted to be more specific in terms of how the financial institutions are impacted by climate change risks. So I'll just give like examples. As regulators, we require some prudential requirements to be fulfilled. In one other area, for example, is which affects the prudential the solvency levels is investments. So the companies, their investments might be impacted by the climate risks, how they're exposed. We can also look at it from the operational risks. They might be exposed that some of their business might be interrupted because of the operational risks arising from climate risks. Thank you.
Great. Welcome. Thank you for those very useful responses and comments. So climate change is occurring and has significant implications for financial sector and its customers, not just for its customers. Actually, its impact on the customers, and because the financial sector does business with the customers, these risks get transmitted to the financial sector. It affects financial inclusion and gender equality, and so one issue that in fact this whole course is about financial inclusion, and climate change is one major factor that, if we don't manage well, could impede our effort to ensure financial inclusion and the purpose of this whole course. Storms, and so we have talked about the reasons, and that is very good. Somewhere a few minutes later, I will go into a bit more detail as to exactly what reasons, exactly what factors press our go buttons as financial sector regulators about climate change. But generally, that is a very good attempt to make. So let's look at what risks are we talking about. Scientists have categorized these risks into two: physical risks and transition risks. So physical risks are the risks that arise from the physical or the direct impact of climate change. And we can have two of them. We can have the acute risks and the chronic risks. The acute risks are event-driven. They are caused by certain events. And so you have events such as rainstorms, you have floods, you have strong winds, you have bushfires. These are event-driven, and they could cause damage to properties, damage to lives, and a lot of things. So that is one physical risk. The chronic risks are longer-term shift in climate patterns. Longer-term shifts in climate patterns. This could be variation in the pattern and amount of rainfall over a certain period of time, gradual increase in temperatures in a geographical area over time, gradual rise in sea levels, and others. So these are the chronic. So we have the acute physical risks and the chronic physical risk, and as we can see, both acute and chronic risk do cause a lot of harm to both the economy and to the financial sector. Transition risks. Transition risks mainly come about because when countries decide to transition from, so as we have seen, climate change, which is caused by global warming, is caused by the emission of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. So the more we emit greenhouse gases, the warmer the earth gets, and more of these risks. And so when countries want to do something about it, they transition from carbon dioxide, high carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions to low carbon dioxide and low greenhouse gas emissions. Can I kindly ask microphones to be muted so that we can, thank you. So transition risks occur because when countries decide to transition from high carbon emission to low carbon emission, they pass laws, they make changes in their policies, there are technological developments, there are market situations that change. It is these situations that cause what we call the transition risk. And let me just give a brief explanation. So, and transition risk will not occur until the countries begin to take specific steps to transition to low carbon emission. And once they do that, they begin to change policies. You would see they would make policies that now frown upon certain things because they cause high carbon emissions, and they'll begin to encourage certain things because they cause low carbon emissions. And those policies may be harmful, may jeopardize the businesses of companies that are involved in those activities. So, for example, when a country wants to transition from fossil fuel, petroleum and its product, to electric energy, you would see that the companies that are involved in the petroleum sector are virtually going to go out of business, and then the companies in the electric energy sector are going to. That is a legal transition risk, because laws would have been made to say bar or reduce the use of fuel, and policies would be made. Technology would develop such that the use of petrol will no longer be the in thing, and there will be other cleaner energy, so-called, that will attract more attention. So you would realize that companies in the petroleum sector, and this is, I'm just using it as one example, will now begin to experience problems. So transition risks are the risks, the changes that result from laws and policies and technology and market environment as a country tries to transition from high carbon to low carbon environment. And it is important that we note that both physical and transition risk have significant financial impact on businesses and for financial institutions. And we will look briefly at these. So I did mention that both physical and transition risks have financial impact on institutions. What exactly does this mean? So these cause certain risks that affect businesses, and these risks get transmitted to financial institutions. So, for example, credit risk. Credit risk has got to do with counterparty default, okay? So usually, take for example that I gave earlier on. If, say, in a certain country, the policy decision has been made to transition from fossil fuel to cleaner energy like electric energy, the companies involved in the petroleum sector will now begin to experience difficulties. There will be lower demand for their product, and they will begin to experience lower sales. So if they borrow money from the banks, they will not be able to pay because their business will now be slowing down and they will not be making as much money as before to be able to pay. So as you can see, these risks actually affect the credit risk of individuals and businesses. So if you have, say, a farmer who borrows money from a microfinance institution to fund his or her farm, and then for some time there is no rain, you see, this farmer will not be able to have a good harvest and sell and pay back the loan to the microfinance institution. So this affects the credit worthiness of the farmer, and it creates credit risk for the financial institutions that are lending money to the farmer. Okay, now let's go to the second one, the market risk. So market risk are the changes in the market value of assets, and climate change can affect market risks in a number of ways, all of which I may not be able to talk about due to the time that we have. But let's look at a couple of examples. So you have, let's say, a hotel or a real estate company that is building close to the coast, because high-end properties and apartments close to the coast. And we know this rise in sea level could happen, and the apartment, the properties could actually become flooded, or there could be once in a while floods which could affect the area. This will affect the prices of those assets, and it will become difficult for the financial institutions that are actually lending money or insuring these businesses, these real estate properties or hotels or whatever, to continue to do business. So you see, climate change also can create market risks for the financial institutions and for the economy. Operational risk can also occur in terms of loss or disruption in logistics and materials and access and services. Strategic risks could also occur where businesses that invest in areas that may be impacted by climate change may actually not succeed in their new investment. And of course, we do have insurance risk, so we know that insurance is priced on frequency and impacts, okay? And as climate change causes these physical climate change events to increase in frequency and in impact, insurance companies now begin to experience more losses than they anticipated, and it creates a lot of climate risk for them, especially as Andrea was talking. She was talking about areas that did not flood before and now are flooding. So because insurance companies have done pricing based on the assumption that certain areas do not flood, they may be priced below a certain amount, but the reality is that those places are now getting flooded much more at a much more higher frequency than before. So this creates insurance risk to the insurance companies. So you see how climate change can affect the real economy, and these risks can get transmitted directly to the financial sector, and therefore the need for us to be interested and to do something about it. But now let's see some specific reasons why we as regulators need to get interested in this. So number one, we have already seen that climate change can affect financial inclusion. How? So you see the climate risks that were not occurring before. Now they begin to occur, like rains in certain areas. And as they increase in frequency and intensity, storms, insurance companies may begin to increase the price, the premiums, and it may get to a level where either the insurance company may not be able to continue to provide that cover because it is just the claims costs are just too high, or the premiums will become so high that the consumers may not be able to afford it, and that may affect financial inclusion. Okay, so we are interested, we should get interested as regulators because climate change can actually affect financial inclusion in a number of ways. Now, climate change can also affect gender inequality because we have seen, that climate weather-related events and disasters tend to affect women and children the more. Already there is this existing inequality between males and female, women and men, and climate change seems to worsen it. You can look at the some NGOs who have done work on this and have published their results, and the evidence there to tell you that climate change may affect, and especially in this part of Africa, where women are more involved in small-scale farming, providing food and water for the family, caring for the family. Climate change seems to increase the burden of women, and that is why, as financial service regulators, we need to get interested. Climate change can also affect poverty levels, because climate change can cause loss of jobs for farmers, for workers who are workers in sectors which are affected by climate change, can cause loss of jobs. And once people lose their jobs, their financial access to financial services becomes challenged, and a lot of things do happen. Now, one of the most important objectives of financial service regulators is to ensure financial stability. You can see that all the issues that I talk about can affect financial stability in a number of ways. So when there is high credit risk caused by climate change, when market prices of assets are going down, assets of banks and insurance companies are going down, when insurance risk is going up, you see this will cause instability to the market. People who have borrowed, people and businesses who have borrowed money will not be able to pay. Farmers do not have access to insurance and to credit, and those who have borrowed are also unable to pay. You see that these will affect financial stability. The risks that we see here, as they go up, may eventually affect financial stability, may affect, as one of the responses earlier on indicated, the business models may no longer be sustainable, and some of them may have to, if nothing is done, fold up. And so the question is, what do we do? What can we do as financial service regulators to address these issues? So for financial services, I'll quickly wrap up the last two slides so we can have some time. We need to, they need to look at investing in climate risk mitigation and climate resilience and climate adaptation, including green bonds and other debt and equities that are climate friendly. Invest in businesses, ventures that result in low carbon emission. Insurance companies must be encouraged or required to integrate climate risk into underwriting practices, investment analysis, and decision making. And there need to be some measuring and public disclosure of carbon footprint so that we can follow where we are going, what progress we are making. It will influence people who are now making decisions. People will become aware what is going on. We will become aware of the impact of our investment. We here as in financial sector, we need to take intentional steps to measure, reduce, and report climate exposure and progress on actions. And then we need to mainstream climate risk management. So financial institutions need to begin to integrate climate risk into their mainstream traditional risk management framework. Climate risk needs to become one of the risks that we are managing. And we need to build skill and capacity, create awareness, make financial institutions aware that climate change is here and there's a role that they can play to get it done. For financial supervisors, our mandate and objectives, yes, this we need to pay attention to our mandate and objective. Climate change is here to cause a lot of harm, and we may consider taking a look at it in our mandate and objectives. In risk management, we need to create a requirement for financial institutions to include risk management into their traditional risk management framework. Climate stress testing. So we need to get financial institutions, insurance companies, to include climate risk into their climate stress testing, so that they will test their stress levels based on scenarios of climate change and see how vulnerable or how robust they are. We need to gather information and data on climate change. Otherwise, we won't know. Information and data will give us the picture where we stand. How many insurance companies, how many financial institutions are exposed to climate risk? To what extent are they exposed to climate risk? Exactly what kind of climate risks are we exposed to? And which sectors are most exposed? Until we get accurate information and data, it will be difficult for us to make decisions and interventions that will help us to mitigate the risks. Examination tools, as we go on-site inspections and financial analysis, we need to include climate risk in the issues that we are examining, in the issues that we are looking at, and looking at how these financial institutions are identifying and mitigating climate risks as part of their business. Disclosure requirement, there needs to be some disclosure requirement. There are international standards and requirements on this, but in our small ways, we need to begin to look at how we can require some disclosures that will help everybody, especially our regulated entities, to begin to consider this emerging risks. We need to remove obstacles to green financing. Green financing are finances or funds that goes to finance businesses that result in low greenhouse gas emissions. And if there are obstacles to things like green bonds and green equity, and we need to begin to look at them as regulators, especially as long as that lies within our domain. And then We need to make appropriate regulatory interventions. We need to begin to support climate risk insurance and agricultural insurance. We need to begin to look at the issue of index insurance and integrate it into and promote it so that it can help us as one of the tools that we need. Collaboration and cooperation is important. Yesterday, Andrea talked about it. Patricia talked about it, and it has come here. In doing something about climate risk, you cannot do it all by yourself. You need to collaborate, you need to cooperate with a lot of stakeholders to make sure that you take appropriate action. Incorporate climate change related risk into risk-based supervision. So in analyzing the various risks that we look at in our risk-based supervision, we need to also look at those risks that are triggered by climate change. So when you are assessing credit risk, you need to pay attention that climate change can also trigger some credit risk. If you are looking at market risk, we need to look at the fact that climate change can also trigger some market risk, operational risk. So we need to begin to incorporate climate change related risk into our risk-based supervision so that they don't sit alone, but they become integral part of our supervisory activities. So as I said, I'll leave the rest of the time for us to do some discussion, and then we can come back and give our response. So we'll go into our groups. We have 20 minutes. We will have 3 groups, and so group 1, you are going to discuss transition risk. Group 2, you are going to discuss acute physical risk, and group 3, chronic physical risk. And these are very simple. Identify 3 ways that the risk assigned to you can manifest both in the real economy and in the financial sector. Very simple. Let's come back on time so we can do the wrap up before our time is out. So Pascal, can we prepare for the breakout rooms?
Yeah, Rochelle is preparing the breakout rooms at the moment. Rochelle, can you let the program leaders know which group they're in? So which group 1 or 2 or 3 they're in?
Yes, Patricia is in group 1, Andrea is in group 2, and Kofi is in group 3.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, if that's clear to everyone, I will open the rooms.